The sky wept in steady drizzles as Isabelle Hartman stood beside her mother's grave, her black umbrella trembling against the wind. The funeral was small, uncomfortably so. No eulogies, no sobbing relatives. Just the low hum of rain on coffin wood, and the awkward presence of neighbors who didn't know what to say about the woman who kept to herself for decades. Isabelle hadn't cried, not yet. Not when the priest spoke Margot's name with a mechanical reverence. Not when the casket lowered into the earth like a memory being buried alive. Their relationship had frayed long before death drew its final line. Margot had always been a fortress, impossible to breach, even for her only daughter. Returning to the creaking Victorian house that had raised her felt like stepping into a mausoleum. Dust clung to forgotten furniture, and the air smelled faintly of lavender and old secrets. Isabelle moved room to room with a hollow detachment, sorting through boxes of untouched memories, photographs without names, books without inscriptions, drawers without purpose. But it was the faint, almost imperceptible squeak in the floorboards of Margot's old bedroom that gave her pause. She knelt, pressing her palm against the warped wood. Something shifted underneath. Curiosity sharpened into urgency. Isabelle retrieved a screwdriver from the hallway closet and pried the board loose, her breath catching as a puff of stale air escaped from the hollow beneath. There, wrapped in brittle linen and bound with yellowed twine, was a sealed envelope, its edges darkened with time. Her name, Isabelle, was scrawled in her mother's tight, slanted script across the front. Hands trembling, she sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. Inside, a letter, several pages long, dense and chaotic, the ink smudged as if written in a rush. Margot's voice spilled out in lines of guilt and confession. Isabelle, if you're reading this, then I'm already gone, and there's no one left to lie to you anymore. You deserve to know who I really was, and who you really are. I kept things from you, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Years ago, I had another daughter. Her name was Eleanor. She didn't die the way I told everyone she did. She didn't die at all. Isabelle froze. Her mind reeled as a lifetime of half-truths, evasions, and blank stares began to click into place like puzzle pieces. Her mother hadn't just been secretive, she had been hiding something monumental. Someone. As she read deeper into the letter, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Her mother hadn't been the woman she thought she was. And the truth, the real truth, was just beginning to surface, as chilling as the rain still tapping against the windows. Isabelle looked back down at the letter, heart pounding. What else had Margot hidden beneath the floorboards of their lives? The name lingered on the page like smoke. Eleanor. Isabelle stared at the delicate handwriting, tracing the letters over and over as if the act might summon clarity. But nothing came. The name meant nothing to her memory. No baby pictures, no whispered stories, no trace of a sister in any version of her childhood. Yet Margot's letter had spoken of Eleanor not as a ghost or metaphor, but as flesh and blood. She was taken from me in a fire I never meant to survive, Margot had written. The world believed she died. That was the point. But what happened that night was no accident. The words echoed in Isabelle's ears long after she'd finished reading. She sat at the dining table, the letter laid out before her like a crime scene. Steam curled from the untouched tea she had poured an hour ago. Rain still painted the windows, but now it seemed to whisper, dig deeper. Fighting off a growing sense of dread, Isabelle opened her laptop and began searching. The fire, if real, had to be on record somewhere. She scoured public archives, poring over articles from small-town newspapers and forgotten databases. Then, tucked between stories about zoning disputes and community picnics, she found it. House fire destroys local residents, one fatality presumed, published March 1988. No survivors named, no body recovered. Her blood ran cold. The address listed was from a town 3 states away. She had never even heard Margot mention it. But the eerie part wasn't just the location. It was the fact that the presumed victim was listed only as a young girl, age unknown, no name, no photo, and no follow-up. There was no death certificate, no official autopsy, just a quiet burial of a tragedy, filed away and forgotten, or erased. Isabelle printed the article and laid it beside the letter. The pieces didn't fit cleanly yet, but the shape was forming. Margot had once lived another life, one that ended in fire. And from that fire, a lie was born. A missing girl, declared dead to the world but not to her mother. But if Eleanor didn't die, where had she gone? And more importantly, why had Margot never spoken of her again? As Isabelle leaned back in her chair, thunder cracked in the distance. A storm was coming, inside and out. And Eleanor, whoever she truly was, might hold the key to everything. The first time Isabelle noticed the black car, she barely gave it a thought. It was parked across the street from her mother's house the morning after the funeral, its windows tinted, engine silent. Probably a neighbor's guest, or some errand runner, she'd told herself. But it was there again later that night. And the next morning. And again, each time in a slightly different spot, always within view of the house, always idle. By the fourth day, the coincidence had soured into paranoia. Isabelle stared at it now from her mother's bedroom window, arms folded tightly across her chest. The car hadn't moved in hours. No one had come or gone. Just that same sleek black sedan, glossy from the rain, sitting like a predator in wait. She grabbed her phone and snapped a photo. Zoomed in. No license plate on the front. The back one was too dirty to make out. Trying to shake the unease, Isabelle turned back to the growing pile of research she'd been compiling. Newspaper clippings, birth record requests, and a carefully annotated copy of her mother's confession letter. But her concentration was shattered. She kept glancing at the window, half expecting the car to vanish, or worse, for someone to step out of it. Then, around dusk, it did move. She rushed to the window as the engine roared to life. The car pulled away slowly, deliberately, like it wanted to be seen. Her heart thudded as it passed under the street lamp, and for a second, she could have sworn she saw a silhouette in the driver's seat. Watching her, Isabelle's breath caught. It was only later that night, while retrieving a forgotten trash bag from the side of the house, that she found it. A single, fresh footprint in the mud. Boot tread. Large. Male. Right beneath the window of her childhood bedroom. Isabelle staggered back, nearly tripping over the garbage bin. Her eyes darted to the street. Empty. Her skin prickled as she locked every door, drew every curtain, and sat on the living room couch, gripping a fireplace poker in her hand. This wasn't just a stalker or nosy neighbor. This was connected to the fire, to Eleanor, to Margot's buried life. Someone else knew what she was digging into, and they didn't want her to find the truth. And as the storm outside deepened, so did a terrifying realization. Her mother had kept secrets for a reason. Maybe not to protect herself, but to protect Isabelle from whatever was still watching. The knock at the door came just after 9 p.m. Isabelle had almost convinced herself to ignore it. She was curled on the couch, a half glass of wine abandoned on the coffee table, the black car and muddy footprints still clawing at the edges of her mind. But something about the sound, measured, deliberate, made her rise. Through the peephole, she saw a woman standing alone on the porch. Mid-30s, rain-speckled coat, hood pushed back to reveal long, damp curls. She looked familiar in that unsettling way, like a childhood photo brought to life in the wrong decade. Isabelle opened the door slowly. "Can I help you?" The woman took a breath. "You're Isabelle Hartman?" She nodded, heart already pounding. The woman hesitated. "I'm Clara Raines, I think I'm your sister." Isabelle's breath caught. The woman, Clara, looked down, then reached into her satchel. She pulled out a worn photograph. Two young girls, side by side. One was unmistakably Isabelle, maybe 4 or 5 years old. The other was older, a few years ahead, with the same hazel eyes and dimpled smile. "My mother, Margot, kept this hidden," Clara said softly. "I found it in a box after I tracked her down." Isabelle took the photo, her fingers trembling. "Where did you get this?" she asked, voice tight. "I was in the fire," Clara said. "I didn't die. I was taken by someone Margot trusted. I grew up under a different name. I didn't even know I was adopted until I turned 18 and started digging." She looked up, her eyes brimming. "Then I found her. Your mother. Our mother. She didn't want to see me. She said it wasn't safe." Isabelle studied her, really studied her. The resemblance was unsettling. The same high cheekbones, the same uneven left eyebrow they'd both apparently inherited from Margot. But something didn't sit right. Clara's story had jagged edges, moments where her voice wavered too much, where her memories didn't sync with Isabelle's. "Why now?" Isabelle asked, quietly. "Why come here after she's gone?" Clara hesitated, then answered with painful honesty, "Because I think someone's after me too, and because I need to know the truth. About the fire, about Margot, about us." Isabelle wanted to slam the door, wanted to throw the photo across the room and pretend this wasn't happening, but she couldn't. The resemblance, the photo, the timing, it was too much to ignore. She stepped aside and let Clara in. As the door clicked shut behind her, the air in the house shifted, denser now, heavier with questions. And as the wind howled outside, Isabelle realized something chilling. If Clara was telling the truth, she wasn't just her sister. She was a survivor of the very secret Margot had died to keep hidden, and if she was lying, then Isabelle had just let a stranger into her home, one who knew far too much. The attic was a furnace of dust and silence, its air thick with the scent of mothballs, old wood, and forgotten time. Isabelle had avoided it for years, always too cluttered, too chaotic, too haunted by childhood memories of boxes that were never to be opened. But now, with Clara asleep downstairs and Margot's cryptic letter still echoing in her head, Isabelle pushed aside old trunks and unused luggage to find the truth. Behind a stack of discolored Christmas decorations, she found it, a hollowed-out section beneath a loose floorboard. Inside, wrapped in a yellowing shawl that still faintly smelled like Margot's rosewater perfume, was a leather-bound journal and a crumbling envelope marked M. Cole, Marina Cole. The name hit like a slap. Isabelle remembered the line from the letter. Margot had lived under another identity, but this was real. The journal's pages were filled with a looping, elegant script, unmistakably her mother's, only this Margot, or Marina, wrote in a tone Isabelle had never known. It was raw, unfiltered, desperate. Flipping through, Isabelle pieced it together. In the early 90s, Margot had been Marina Cole, a brilliant linguistics professor with a sharp wit and a quiet magnetism. But behind the ivory tower facade, she was entangled with Senator Aldrich Klein, a man 10 years her senior, charismatic, married, and utterly untouchable. The affair had started in secrecy and ended in scandal. When Marina discovered his involvement in a complex web of financial crimes, embezzlement, offshore accounts, hush payments, she'd tried to leave. But then a journalist with damning evidence turned up dead. The final straw came when someone tried to abduct her daughter. Not Isabelle, someone named Eleanor. That's when the program stepped in. Witness protection. New name, new city, new life. And a demand. Never look back. Isabelle sank to the attic floor, her hands trembling around the brittle edges of her mother's double life. Everything Margot had ever told her about their past was a fabrication. The shy, widowed librarian from upstate New York had once stood in front of congressional committees under an alias, had navigated threats and blackmail, and had lost a daughter to the fire of her own reinvention. Or so she thought. She turned the final page and found a paperclip holding a Polaroid, grainy and slightly faded. It showed Marina Margot standing beside a young girl, maybe 5 or 6. Eleanor, her eyes wide and curious, her hand clutched tight in her mother's. On the back, scrawled in the same ink as the journal, "She deserved better. I tried to save her. God forgive me if I failed." Isabelle blinked hard. The attic groaned as the wind picked up outside, but she barely noticed. For the first time, she saw her mother not as the cold, distant woman who had raised her, but as someone who had carried the unbearable weight of survival, regret, and sacrifice. And now, with Clara's sudden appearance and a shadowed past creeping into the present, Isabelle had to ask herself something terrifying. Had her mother truly failed to save Eleanor? Or had someone made sure she couldn't? The lockbox was hidden in plain sight, just a weathered safe tucked beneath a stack of old furniture in the back of the basement. Isabelle had noticed it before, but it was too easy to dismiss, too ordinary. After all, it was just another piece of her mother's life that felt too detached. But tonight, with everything she'd uncovered, it felt like the last remaining piece of the puzzle. The key was where Margot had always kept it, in a small, inconspicuous tin box inside a drawer in the kitchen. Isabelle's fingers shook as she turned the key, the click of the lock echoing in the quiet house. Inside, the first thing that caught her eye was a thin file, labeled in bold typed letters. Case number 3084, James Cunningham. The name meant nothing to Isabelle until she flipped it open. James Cunningham, 42, investigative journalist, dead. The first few pages outlined his career, focused, driven, and dangerously close to exposing a financial scandal that had begun to swallow political power. But the details in Margot's file told a darker story. Cunningham had been onto something more than embezzlement. He had uncovered a network of corruption that reached the highest levels of government, and that network had wanted him gone. A sharp gasp escaped Isabelle's lips as she flipped through the pages, eyes skimming over details of Cunningham's final days. His last article had been about the shady dealings between Aldrich Klein, the senator, and a number of powerful financiers. But the police report was vague, an apparent mugging gone wrong. His body was found in an alley, beaten and bloodied, with a single note left in his pocket. "Stay away from things that don't concern you." Isabelle felt sick to her stomach. She couldn't believe it. Her mother had known this man, had known the exact circumstances of his death. And yet, all these years, Margot had told Isabelle that her past was behind her, that there was nothing left to fear. But this file told a different story. The final pages of the report were a series of photos, grainy black and white shots of Cunningham's body, of his apartment, and one photograph that made Isabelle's blood freeze. It was taken from a distance, a grainy image of a group of people at a bar. The picture was blurry, but there, in the background, unmistakable, Clara's father, Charles Raines. Isabelle's heart pounded as she traced the outline of the man in the photo. The details clicked into place. Clara had mentioned her father's business dealings before, but Isabelle had never connected him to the scandal. Now, it seemed like he was a part of it. This was no coincidence. The timing, the secrecy, the way all the pieces fit together, it was clear now that Cunningham's murder hadn't just been a random tragedy. It was the result of someone's desperate effort to keep the truth hidden, a truth that Margot had been willing to die for. And then Isabelle found something even more chilling. Tucked into the back of the file was another piece of paper, a single note written in Margot's handwriting. "If anything happens to me, look to Cunningham's files. The answers are there. But don't trust anyone, especially not Charles." Isabelle's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't understand it all, couldn't make sense of the twisted web her mother had woven. But she knew one thing for sure. Her mother's life had been tied to this conspiracy far deeper than Isabelle had ever imagined. The murder of James Cunningham was just the beginning. And if Isabelle wasn't careful, she might be next. She shoved the file back into the lockbox and snapped the lid shut, her pulse racing. But as she turned to leave the basement, a thought struck her with sudden force. Had Margot known this entire time that Clara's father, Charles Raines, was part of the very web that had nearly destroyed their lives? And more importantly, did Clara know? Isabelle barely had time to catch her breath after finding the murder file before the shadows outside her window shifted again. The darkness had never seemed so suffocating, the house so empty. A sudden crash of wind rattled the panes, as if something or someone was trying to make its way in. She had barely closed the basement door when she heard a soft but deliberate knock on the front door. She froze, heart leaping into her throat. It was too late. Too late for visitors. But then again, she had to face the truth. The moment she discovered the lockbox, she'd opened the floodgates to something much larger than herself. And now, there was no turning back. Isabelle walked cautiously to the door, her hand hovering over the handle. When she peered through the peephole, she saw a familiar face, a face she never thought she'd see again. Aunt Nadine. The last time Isabelle saw her aunt was at her mother's wedding, long before Margot had completely shut herself off from everyone. Nadine had been one of Margot's closest confidants, someone she trusted implicitly. But she'd vanished from their lives years ago, and the reason had always been whispered about but never truly explained. Isabelle opened the door, her pulse racing. "Aunt Nadine? What are you doing here?" Nadine's expression was tight. her eyes scanning the street behind her as if checking for someone. Or something. "We need to talk. Inside. Now." Isabelle stepped back, allowing her in. As Nadine entered, she noticed her aunt's disheveled appearance. Her usual pristine attire was replaced with dark, baggy clothes, her hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot. She didn't look like the composed woman Isabelle had remembered. "What's going on?" Isabelle asked, her voice sharp with urgency. She was beginning to feel the weight of everything crashing down on her. Each new revelation only seemed to lead to more dangerous questions. Nadine closed the door behind her, locking it with a swift, practiced motion. She didn't seem like someone who was making a casual visit. "You shouldn't have opened the file," Nadine said quietly, her voice steady but filled with a sharp edge. "You've stirred up something that should have stayed buried." Isabelle felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Nadine sighed, her gaze turning distant, like someone trying to come to terms with a terrible truth. "I was a part of it. The witness protection plan. I helped Margot escape. But I wasn't just some bystander, Isabelle. I was part of the operation. I was the one who made sure she stayed hidden." Isabelle recoiled, the words feeling like a punch to the gut. Her aunt, the trusted family friend, had been involved in the lies, the cover-up, all of it. It felt like the foundation of her entire world was crumbling. "What do you mean? Why didn't you ever tell me?" Isabelle's voice shook with disbelief. She had always thought her aunt had been a victim, someone who had been left out of the fold. Now she realized that Nadine wasn't just complicit in hiding Margot's secret. She had been an active player in it. "Because I didn't want you to know the truth." Nadine's voice was almost a whisper now. "Margot, she wasn't just running from Aldrich Klein and his corruption. She was running from the truth she didn't want anyone to see. She had to protect Eleanor, protect you, and me. There's more, Isabelle. So much more." Isabelle's mind was racing. Every instinct told her to press, to demand the answers, but there was something in Nadine's face, something broken, that made her pause. She could see the guilt in her aunt's eyes, a regret that ran deeper than Isabelle had ever understood. "You think I don't know what it's like to live with a secret?" Nadine continued, her voice low. "You think I don't regret every day that I kept Margot's lies going? I loved her, Isabelle. I loved her in a way that made me do things, terrible things, that I can never take back." Suddenly, everything felt wrong. The air in the room seemed thicker, colder. Isabelle could feel the weight of the past closing in, pressing on her chest. She took a step back, heart pounding. "You loved her?" Isabelle asked, the words coming out slowly, almost as if testing the waters of a dangerous revelation. "How? I don't understand. You were a part of the lie, the deception." Nadine's eyes filled with something that could have been shame, but also sorrow. "I was in love with the man she fled from, Aldrich Klein. But she was smarter than me. She knew he was dangerous, Isabelle. And I didn't. I didn't see it until it was too late. You think I haven't thought about the way my choices tore us apart? But I couldn't leave. And now, I've lost everything." Isabelle felt the pieces of her world shatter. Her aunt, the woman who had always been a figure of stability, had loved the very man her mother had fled from, the man who had murdered Cunningham, who had pulled them all into a web of deceit. Nadine's voice dropped to a whisper. "He'll come for you too, Isabelle. He'll come for Clara. He'll come for all of us. And when he does, there's no hiding anymore." Isabelle stood at the edge of the overgrown clearing, the once grand remnants of a house long reduced to charred wood and moss-covered stone. The old Langford property, where the fire had supposedly claimed Eleanor's life, had been abandoned for decades. Nature had reclaimed it, but the scars of what happened there still lingered, heavy in the air like smoke that never quite dissipated. She crouched near the base of a scorched beam, fingers brushing against the brittle, blackened wood. It was the first time she had returned to the scene since reading her mother's confession, and she wasn't alone. Clara watched silently from behind, arms wrapped around herself. The silence between them had grown thicker with each revelation. Though Clara claimed to be Eleanor, the tension that lingered every time she opened her mouth told Isabelle she wasn't hearing the whole truth. Still, there was something undeniable about her presence here, like she was tethered to the ground by memory. "This is where it happened," Clara finally said, her voice low and distant. "Where it all ended and started again." Isabelle looked up, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Clara took a shaky breath. "The fire wasn't an accident. It wasn't even meant to kill anyone. It was meant to erase someone." She knelt beside Isabelle, brushing her fingers along the edge of the beam. "Margot set the fire, or helped someone do it. After the kidnapping attempt failed, after I escaped, she said we had to disappear, that no one could ever know Eleanor existed. Not the state, not the program, not even you." Isabelle recoiled slightly. The thought of her mother orchestrating a fire, even in the name of protection, made her stomach churn. "You're telling me she faked your death?" Clara nodded. "She told me to run. Told me to follow the creek through the woods and wait for Aunt Nadine. But Nadine never came. Someone else did." Isabelle's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "I don't know," Clara said quietly. "I remember footsteps, heavy ones, a man's voice. Then I remember pain. And after that, nothing for a long time." She looked away, blinking back tears. "I woke up in a clinic, far from here. They said I'd been found unconscious in the woods, with burns, a concussion, and no ID. The doctors called me a Jane Doe. And I stayed that way for years." Isabelle's thoughts spiraled. If Clara was telling the truth, and at this point enough threads had aligned to make it plausible, then everything she'd believed about her family was a carefully constructed illusion. Her mother hadn't just run from a dangerous man. She had sacrificed one daughter's identity to protect the other. "Why didn't Margot ever tell me?" Isabelle whispered, her voice cracking. "Why bury the truth under floorboards? Why not? Tell me who you were." Clara looked at her with hollow eyes. "Because the truth got people killed. The arson was never just about me. It was about covering up something else. Something Margot knew and someone was willing to pay to keep buried." Isabelle turned away, trying to make sense of it all. Her eyes caught a glint of metal beneath a pile of leaves, a singed bracelet, its delicate silver frame warped by heat. As she picked it up, a faint engraving shimmered in the dim light. "For E, with all my love, M." It was real. The fire, the girl, the loss. And it was never supposed to happen. But the part that chilled Isabelle most wasn't the charred earth beneath her feet or the smell of smoke that still seemed to linger. It was the realization that someone had betrayed her mother that night. Someone had known about the plan, about the escape, and had leaked it to the enemy. The fire had been set, but not only by Margot. There was a second arsonist, Isabelle said, almost to herself. Someone paid off to finish the job. Clara nodded grimly. Margot never figured out who, but she always suspected someone inside the program, someone close. Suddenly, Isabelle's mind flashed to Nadine's words. "He'll come for all of us." The betrayal had begun long before the fire, and it wasn't over. The rain beat against the windows of Victor Gray's secluded lake house, a rhythmic tapping that masked the rising tension inside. Isabelle sat rigidly on the edge of a leather armchair, the envelope of documents from the murder file clenched in her hand. Across from her, Victor stirred his tea with clinical precision, the clink of the spoon unnervingly calm. "I have to admit," Victor said, glancing up, "your mother underestimated your tenacity." Isabelle bristled. "She trusted you. She said if anything happened to her, I should come to you." He offered a small, almost apologetic smile. "And you did, just like she hoped." But Margot never realized how deep she was in, or how dangerous the truth could become. The words sent a chill through her. Something had shifted in his tone. Gone was the warm, avuncular presence who once walked her down a courthouse hallway with a proud hand on her shoulder. In his place sat a man untethered from sentiment, all sharp eyes and quiet menace. "I found the file, Victor. The one with the journalist who was murdered. The photo of Clara's father at the scene. You knew all of it." Victor sighed and set the spoon down. "I did. But you don't understand the cost of what you're holding. That file is more than a piece of your mother's past. It's leverage against a man powerful enough to erase people with a phone call. A man who's still watching. Isabelle's stomach dropped. The man Margot fled from. Her former lover. He's still alive? Victor nodded slowly. Alive, protected. Elevated. He has judges, officers, media figures in his pocket. Your mother tried to expose him once, through that journalist. That's why the reporter died. And why Margot ended up in witness protection. Her heart pounded. So you're telling me you've been working for him? I've been balancing loyalties, he said carefully. Your mother was in over her head, but she had something he wanted. Proof. Documents. That file. And now, so do you. He leaned forward, his voice softening into something that almost sounded like regret. I didn't want to hurt you, Isabelle. I only ever wanted to contain this. If the wrong people find out what you've uncovered, Clara won't be the only one hunted. You're already on the list. She stood abruptly. You're threatening me? I'm warning you, he said. That file needs to disappear. The room seemed to constrict around her, the air suddenly too heavy to breathe. Isabelle backed away, clutching the file to her chest like a lifeline. The man she had confided in, depended on, was the very spider at the center of the web. You played both sides, she whispered, fury mounting. All this time, you were never trying to protect me. You were managing me. Victor didn't deny it. Your mother was strong, but she broke the rules. She was always going to pay for that. I just made sure the fallout didn't destroy everything. Until now. A noise outside made them both turn, gravel shifting beneath tires. Lights flooded through the rain-smeared windows. Another car had arrived. Isabelle ran for the back exit, adrenaline surging. Victor's voice followed her. You don't know what you're getting into, Isabelle. That file is a death sentence. But she was already gone, heart racing as she disappeared into the stormy night, clutching the murder file like it was the only thing that could keep her alive. What she didn't know yet was that Victor had already made one last call, and someone else was already waiting for her. The final confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom or a boardroom. It happened in the nursery of the abandoned estate where Isabelle had spent her earliest years, a place that had been left to rot, but where Margot's secrets had taken root like ivy through cracked brick. The wind moaned through the broken windows as Isabelle stepped inside, her clothes soaked from the rain, the murder file pressed tightly to her chest. She wasn't alone. Clara was already there, standing beneath the crumbling mobile that still hung above the scorched crib. You came, Clara said softly, her voice trembling. He'll be here any minute. Isabelle nodded, trying to suppress the tornado of thoughts in her head. Clara. Sister? Stranger? Victim? Or a player in a game that had started long before either of them understood the rules? You're really her, Isabelle said, studying her face in the dim light. You're Eleanor. Clara's eyes glistened. I always was. I just didn't know who to be without her. Before either could say more, footsteps echoed down the hall, measured, expensive shoes on old hardwood. Then he appeared. Martin Devereaux, the former congressman. The man Margot had once loved. The man she'd later feared, gray-templed, impeccably dressed, and calm as a man attending a fundraiser, not confronting the daughters of the woman he tried to erase. Well, he said, surveying them both. It's almost poetic, isn't it? Marina, Margot, always had a flair for drama. Isabelle stepped forward, the file raised like a weapon. We know everything. About the journalist you had killed? About the laundering, the fire, the cover-up. Devereaux chuckled. Do you now? Because your mother didn't tell you the real secret. Clara glanced at Isabelle, alarmed. What is he talking about? Isabelle shook her head. He's bluffing? Devereaux's smile widened, but there was venom behind it. Am I? Go ahead, Isabelle. Open the back of that file. The hidden flap. With trembling fingers, Isabelle turned over the file and felt it, just under the binding. A thin seam. She peeled it open, and pulled out one last envelope. Her name was scrawled across it in Margot's handwriting. Inside was a birth certificate, and it didn't say Isabelle Hartman. It said Isabelle Devereaux. Clara gasped. Devereaux stepped forward. "You were never meant to know. Margot had you after she fled. You were mine. She tried to keep you safe by hiding the truth, even from you." Isabelle staggered back, the world spinning. "No, that's not possible." "It's the final irony," Devereaux said smoothly. "You were the insurance policy, the one thing she knew I'd never destroy. My blood. And now you're here, threatening to burn it all down." Clara turned to her, heartbroken. "You're his daughter?" "I didn't know," Isabelle cried. "None of this changes what he did," Devereaux shrugged. "But it changes you. If you go public with that file, you're not just taking me down. You're tying your name to the scandal. You'll be dragged through the mud. Every courtroom win. Every accolade. Gone." He stepped closer, voice low and poisoned. "Are you willing to destroy yourself to destroy me?" The air was electric. Clara's hand closed around Isabelle's. Then Isabelle made her choice. She lit a match and dropped it on the file. Flames licked the edges, curling up around years of evidence. Clara gasped. Devereaux smirked, but Isabelle's eyes were locked on his. "I'm not saving you," she said. "I'm freeing myself." Devereaux started to speak, but Isabelle raised a phone. "I made copies, sent them to 3 reporters. I just didn't need to carry your filth anymore." His expression curdled. Sirens wailed in the distance. Clara squeezed Isabelle's hand. "You may be my blood," Isabelle said as officers pulled into the driveway, "but I am nothing like you." As Devereaux was led away, the sisters stepped into the rain. 2 daughters, once separated by fire and lies, now standing in the ashes of a past neither asked for. And for the first time in years, Isabelle breathed, truly breathed.